Hi guys, welcome to my channel. It's just Sonia here, and today I've got this video for you guys. Basically, if you're deciding to go to Russia to do your studies, or if you already have applied and you're going to Russia soon to do your studies, this video might be informative for you. So I chose to do this video because when I was going into uni, I didn't see anything like this out there, and I wanted that information and I wanted that insight, but I just couldn't find it anyway. So I wanted to do this video. If it helps anyone, then great. And do not forget to subscribe to this channel for more content, and of course give this video a huge thumbs up if you like it, and we're gonna jump right into it. If you do see me looking down, by the way, please don't mind me. I just wrote some notes because I do not want to lose my train of thought, and also I want to get as much information in as possible without having to do like a two-part series to this and that kind of thing. I just want to list down the 10 things that I think are important for you to know. Obviously I can't sort of touch bases on every single thing you need to know, but these are just like the basic things, the important things that you probably need to know. So just to give you a bit of a backstory, I'm currently a doctor. I recently graduated about 2 months ago. So yeah, I'm all done. I went to Russia in 2015 and I was there for about 6 years. So I was studying general medicine. Yeah, I was studying in a city called Nizhny Novgorod. So that's basically, most of my information might be from my stay over there, because I stayed there the entire 6 years until I finished my course, and then I came back here. So I'm currently in Botswana, which is where I live. I lived here before I went to Russia. And so yeah, if you are coming from Botswana or any other country in Southern Africa or anywhere really, this might be informative for you, because like I said, when I wanted to go to Russia and I started doing my research, I wanted like a realistic version of what to expect, like what exactly am I walking into, and I couldn't get that anywhere. So let's just get right into the things that you might need to know. The ways that you can get to Russia is to go through an agency, and you can do this through an agency called Rakus, and you basically have to go through them to apply to a Russian university. Now if you want to sort of do some research before you go to the agent, that might be a good idea, just so you have an idea of what you want to do, where you want to do it, if you want to do that kind of thing, or they might sort of give you some advice. Personally, I didn't go through Rakus, I went through a different agency, and when I went there, I told them what course I wanted to do. I said I wanted to do general medicine, and they basically gave me some advice to say this is the best city for you to do that course, and they might do the same for you. I didn't go through Rakus, so I'm not sure what their application process looks like. Pretty sure if you get their contact details or go to the offices or whatever the case, you could get that information from them and you can get things sorted out. So another way to apply to go to Russia is through yourself. So if you apply directly to the university by yourself, it means that you're in direct contact with the university. But like I said, I think it's better to go through an agency, because I feel like they give you a better rundown of where to go. So if you do decide to apply by yourself, you have to understand that you might not understand the process and everything, and also just remember that the person who you're communicating on that side might not be speaking English, especially if you're applying for a university where they only teach in Russian. So I say it's better to apply through an agency. Another way that you can get to Russia is to apply for a scholarship. If there are any scholarships that your government is offering to go to Russia to study the course that you wish to study, it might be a good idea to apply for that scholarship. If you have the grades for it, I say why not go for it. Once you've decided to get to Russia, whether it's through an agency or self-application or through a scholarship, you're basically going to have to apply for different things. So you're going to have to do your application to the university, and when you do get accepted, they will probably send you something called an invitation to come to Russia. So your agency might advise you to start working on your visa application, preparing your documents, so that by the time your invitation gets to you, you can just go straight to the Russian embassy, apply for a student visa, and then you're good to go. So of course, once you've got everything said and done, you've got your visa, you've got your plane ticket, you're gonna have to carry all those important documents, your passport, of course, with your visa in it. You're probably going to need your original copy of your school certificate, whether you did Cambridge IGCSE, whether you did A levels, whatever you did, you're gonna need that certificate and that transcript. Probably you're gonna need the original ticket with you, and of course your birth certificate. And I always advise you to just carry all your important documents in case you need them, because it's better to have everything on you than to have people sending things to you. So yeah, carry everything with you. And then the second thing that I wanted to speak on is research. So when I say do your research, I mean do your research cautiously. Obviously, every city shows like the best they have to offer on the internet, and you're probably gonna be thinking, oh great, this place is great, it looks amazing, it looks nice, which is the same thing I did, which is a huge mistake. I heard I was going to Nizhny Novgorod, everything was finalized, and I looked it up and I was like, oh great, looks nice, but it doesn't really show you what the city looks like for real. It just shows you the main tourist attractions. So when you do your research, just keep in mind that what you see on the internet is not what you're going to see in real life. It might be different, like I always say, like Russia didn't really look as European as I thought it would look, because I had this idea in my head. When I got there, it was sort of different. So you also have to remember that you're going to live there. You're not going there as a tourist. If you're going there to be a student, you're going to live there, you're not going there to be a tourist. So you have to understand that the city might not look as great as it looks on pictures, which is pretty, it's pretty obvious. I think that's something we all know. So another reason why you might want to do your research is just so you can have a rundown and an idea of whether the city you're going to aligns with the budget you're looking at. So if your budget is sort of limitless, to say the least, you could go to Moscow, because it's a very expensive city to live in, especially as a student. Of course, it's the capital city, so it's very expensive to live there. But if you're willing to spend the extra money to have sort of a better living situation, that's all right. It's definitely more expensive for students in terms of transport, housing, everything. It's more expensive, but if you can afford it, I would recommend that you do go there. If the university that you're going to and the course that you're doing is in Moscow, then great, I'll say go for it. So if you're planning to go to a city like St. Petersburg, of course it's a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit cheaper than Moscow, but it is quite expensive to live there as a student. But if your budget allows it, I say why not? If you're looking for more of a sustainable budget for a student, I would say you go to a city like Kazan or Nizhny Novgorod as well, because those cities are a little bit more easy on the pocket, and transport is cheaper, so is housing, and the hostel fees as well are quite cheap. The only issue is that you might not get good quality living, to be quite honest with you. And also, if you're more of an outgoing person, you love to go places, do things. Cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg have a lot of things to do, whereas these other cities don't have much to do. You'll find that in your first year, you've pretty much done everything that there is to do, which is alright, because at the end of the day, you're there to study. Well, now, to wrap that up, it sounds better to live in a bigger city like Moscow or St. Petersburg, but to tell you the truth, it's better to live in a place where you can afford to live as a student, you can afford to live a good life. And also, if you want to go to these nice places like Sochi and all these other places, those are places that you can go and just travel to and visit when you have the time to, when you have a semester break. The next thing that I want to talk about is language. So there is a huge language barrier here when it comes to Russia. It is Russia, so they do speak Russian. Not a lot of people speak English there. Well, if you're going to Russia, of course you have to expect that they do speak Russian there. Not a lot of people speak English. It's very rare, in fact, to find people who speak English. Maybe the younger people do speak more English than the older people, but like I said, it's very rare. Everything is in Russian. The transport system is basically everything. So when you go there, whether you're going to study in English medium or you're going to study in Russian, you're still going to have to learn how to communicate. If you're going to be studying in Russian, you're probably going to do a year of Russian. It's a preparatory course called Batfak, and you're going to learn your Russian even better than those of us who studied in English medium. And we just basically went in and we did Russian classes, but it wasn't necessarily to that extent of we are learning in Russian. So basically, yeah, you're gonna have to go in and learn the language. The language barrier might be an issue. You might have trouble the first time that you are in Russia because you're not gonna understand anything. But I would also suggest that you download a Google Translator app so that you're able to actually just, show somebody if you need something, especially if it's something important, like you need to go to the bank, or you just arrived, you need to go to the dean's office to submit your documents and all that kind of thing. The language is definitely an issue in the first year. You're going to struggle quite a little bit, but we have translation apps these days. Just get your Google Translate on, do what you can do, but you're gonna have to learn the language, and as you definitely need it, whether you learn in English or you learn in Russian, you're still gonna need at least just a little bit, just enough to get you around. You know what I mean? Like, you need to know something, just enough, Another thing that I wanted to cover is stereotypes. So we can't do a video about Russia without covering stereotypes, for real. So the first stereotype that I want to cover is racism. I get asked this question a lot. Everybody always asks me the same thing. Are Russians racist people? So there's a very difficult way to explain or answer that question. So personally, I've never had like a racist experience while I was in Russia for my entire 6 years, but I have heard other people mention the fact that they had people who were completely racist towards them and that kind of thing. People do ask me this, and at the end of the day, it's a very difficult question to answer because I don't think you can generalize a whole population and just say they're all racist. There are different types of people. Some Russians can be very mean, they can be very stern, which is most of them. I feel like that's just a European thing. Like, they're very stern and they can be very rude. Some of them can be assholes, for lack of a better word. But at the same time, some of them can be really nice. Like, I've met some of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life in Russia. So they can be different types of people that you will meet. So another thing that is actually worth adding here, which I didn't mention, is that these people love to stare, okay? Like, you get stared at all the time, whether you're on the bus, whether you're at the mall, it doesn't matter where you are, people will always be staring at you. And I guess it's just this thing where they're not used to seeing foreigners, and sometimes you might even get like little kids asking their parents like, why is this person black and stuff. That happens like a lot. So yeah, you will get stared at quite a lot while you're there, and that's just something that you might have to get used to because they stare a lot. At the end of the day, if I want to answer that question, I can say that they're more aggressive, they're more stern, and they're a little bit mean. They're not necessarily, I wouldn't say they're necessarily racist, because if you see the way that they treat each other as well, it's pretty much the same, hey? So yeah, I'd say like most of them are more on like the stern and very serious side, whereas some of them are pretty nice, and then some of them are just racist. Like, they just are. Some of them are. Racism is everywhere, unfortunately. It's an issue that we deal with everywhere in the world, and you might find it if you go there, and I hope you don't. So yeah, that's that covered. And then another stereotype I wanted to talk about is obviously the weather. The weather, like, the weather is tough. The weather is pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie about that. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. The weather is rough. So the weather is pretty rough. It was probably one of the hardest things I had to adjust to be quite honest with you, because it does get very cold. It is very, very cold, and it's very gloomy. It snows a lot, of course. Sometimes it's like minus 31, minus 35 degrees. It's very cold, and it's also very dark outside, so you get get like just a little bit of light, like just a little bit. And then it's very dark for the rest of the day, which is very confusing. You're fatigued, you're gonna feel very tired. That's the time that most people start to feel very low. They start thinking about going home. But I just want to let you know that it's something that you can overcome. It's not something that's impossible. And people usually ask me like, how can you cope with the weather, blah blah blah. How do you usually cope with that very extreme harsh weather? But there's no secret, there's no formula to cope with the weather. It's just cold. Like, you're gonna feel it. And the thing is, if you're coming from here going there, the mistake that I made was I bought a lot of winter clothes here and I went with them, which I wasted space, which I could have put other things that I needed when taken with me to that side. It's better to go and buy your winter stuff in Russia, because they have coats and all these sort of gear and things that you're going to need. The coats, the shoes, everything, the hats, the scarves, they have them there and they're suited for that particular type of weather. So forget about buying winter stuff here. It's better to just buy a few here, maybe just one or two, and buy the rest of the stuff there, because what they have is tailored for that particular weather. So that's what you might want to do. The seasons do change and it's not always going to be that way. It's just that winter just seems to drag along. It seems very long, but it will pass as long as you get the right clothing for the weather and you prepare yourself. It is going to be very hectic, but you can actually get through it. So you do it. So another stereotype that I wanted to cover is basically Russian women. People say that they have the most beautiful women in the world, which they do actually. I wouldn't say the most beautiful women in the world, because I feel like beautiful women come from all parts of the world, right? Hello. So yeah, they do have very beautiful women, like gorgeous model looking type of women. So that stereotype is true, that they have very gorgeous women. So yeah, that part is true. It is not a lie. They are very beautiful and they dress very well, and yeah, there's nothing more I can say about that besides the fact that yeah, they are. So another thing that address is, do Russians drink a lot? Do they drink a lot of vodka? Yes, they do. There's definitely a lot of drinking that goes on there, but you know, I feel like they just know how to have a good time. You know, like if you were to just go out on a random night and you meet some Russians and you go party with them, you will definitely have a good time. They know how to have a good time. So yeah, that is also another stereotype that is true. They do drink a lot, and yeah, usually you might find that you're on a bus early in the morning and people are reeking of alcohol. But I guess it's just to keep warm. I don't know what it is, but they do drink a lot. So the next thing that I wanted to cover is transport and living costs. So if you're gonna go to Russia as a student, you're probably going to be thinking about staying in the hostel accommodation, which is usually provided by a university, but there are other hostels that you can find within the city. Those might be a little bit more expensive than the ones that your university provides, because they will probably be better looking, be in better conditions. So if you want to stay in the hostel, if you want to be within the hostel community, that is fine, you can do that. Personally, I lived in the hostel for about 2 years, and then I moved out of the hostel. So usually the hostels are divided. They have hostels for international students, and then they have hostels for the Russian students. So sometimes you might be a little bit mixed. You know, you might find that there are Russians that are living in the international students hostels, but that's just if there's no space in their hostels. But that's that. So you're probably going to be living around most of the international students, whether they're from India, whether they're from Malaysia, wherever it is that they're from, you guys are going to be mixed. So another option that you can have, as opposed to living in the hostel, you could live in an apartment. Living in an apartment is obviously way better than living in the hostels, because the hostels are a little bit more restricted. You know, you have the security check to get in through. Sometimes you're not allowed to have visitors past certain hours. You know, there's also like a bit of a curfew that you might have, that we had in our university. Of course, there's certain ways that you can avoid having that curfew and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, having an apartment just basically gives you your freedom. And yeah, that's that. You could even find somebody to move in with so you guys can split the rent, but I wouldn't suggest that you move into an apartment straight away. I feel like it's better to live in the hostels first before you just go out there into the world and you start to live alone, or you start to live with a friend, whatever you choose to do. But I definitely feel like it's better to start off in the hostels, because by that time you're still getting used to how the system works in Russia. You're still getting to learn the language, you're still getting to settle in, and your first and second year are basically the years that you need to do those things. So I got to live in my own place when I was in third year, which was a great time because by then my Russian was okay. It was enough for me to communicate with the landlady and sort of just live in a place alone. And when I was there, it was pretty great. I lived in the same apartment from my third year until my sixth year when I graduated. So yeah, definitely try and get yourself to understand how things work before you just go ahead and move out. So apartments usually range, it depends on what you like, but they usually range between, I would say, 12K to all the way up to, for a student, let's just say 20K, and you can find anything in between. You could find a one-room apartment, you can find a studio apartment, whatever it is that you want. I want to say a few things about how to get an apartment, because some people do ask me this question quite a lot because they find it quite difficult, and it can be a little bit difficult because now they have this rule where you have to do your own registration to the apartment that you're living at. So Jesus. So when you're looking for an apartment, you probably go to an app looking for an apartment, sort of like Avito. They do have apartments on there, and you're gonna find your apartment, and usually it's going to be connected to an agent, a real estate agent, who you will have to pay a certain commission to. And then you're also going to have to pay a security deposit for the first month, which will be given back to you given that you don't destroy anything in the apartment. We all know how that works. So then you're also going to have to do a registration, because when you're living in the school hostel, you're registered there. But when you live in an apartment, you have to register yourself in that apartment. So this is where it gets tricky for foreigners, because some Russians don't really like that process. I was lucky that my landlady was willing to do it for me, and yeah, I was able to get my registration to the apartment. The problem with that is if you travel, you go up to a different city, and let's say you stay in a hotel, they're going to cancel that registration, and now you're registered under that hotel for the time being that you do stay there. That means you're gonna have to go back and redo the registration process. So you need to keep in mind when you do these things. That's why I'm saying in your first couple of years, please do stay in hostel until you understand all these things, because there are a lot of rules when it comes to being in Russia, and especially when you're living in an apartment. So gosh, my voice is cracking. My voice is literally cracking, and I have no idea what to do about it. So yeah, I'm getting some tea. I'm gonna spill more tea. So I got my tea and I'm ready to go. So we're gonna try this again. And yeah, so I was talking about apartments and just giving you a rundown, but that's nothing for you to worry about if you're going straight into Russia. If you're bold enough to do that, then big ups to you, and you want to use my advice, I suggest that you do, and I hope that you do find the process very easy. But if you're just going to live in the hostels, this is nothing for you to worry about yet. Unfortunately, as a student, as an international student, there is a lot of documentation that you have to deal with when you are in Russia, and there are little things that you might have to watch out for. So yeah, yeah, also you have to remember that if you are choosing to go and live in an apartment, you're gonna incur other costs such as utilities. For example, you're gonna have to pay for the water bill, the gas bill. You're also gonna have to pay for the electricity, of course. For me, my utilities were included into the rent amount, and then I paid the electricity separately, which wasn't too much. I paid about 500 rubles a month because I rationed how I use my electricity, which is not much, as you can tell. So living there is definitely cheaper. Another thing that I wanted to cover is the transport costs. When it comes to transport, that was one of the good things that I loved about the city that I lived in. The transport was very cheap. So you have different forms of transport. Obviously you have the buses, you have the metro, you could use the metro metro if you want to. Also, you could use the trolley buses. They also have taxi services like Uber and Yandex that you can use on your phone, which is pretty great. If you're going to study medicine and you're going to be a medical student, it's definitely beneficial to have all these different forms of transport, because sometimes you find that you have gynecology in this part of the city, sometimes you have pediatrics in the other part of the city, you have internal medicine way on the other side of the city, so it's definitely beneficial. So you might want to get a transport card which costs about 700 rubles, and you can use particular forms of transport with that, and that's about $10 I think, which is pretty great per month. If you're going to spend $10 on the transport, that is pretty great. And then you could also use things like Uber and stuff like that, like I mentioned, which is obviously a little bit more expensive, but when it is very cold, you could probably want to, just take a taxi. Another thing that I wanted to jump into is the education system in Russia. So when it comes to the education system, so you can have a batch. Let's say we're all first years this year, we're a full batch, but then we learn in groups. So our university had groups from A to however much you are. It keeps going. And then other universities, I've heard, do numbers, so from 1, 2, so on and so forth. So we do the letter system, so you have from group A, you have group A, you have group B, C, D, and so on and so forth. So within each group, you're going to have about 8 to 15 students, depending on how many students there are in your batch. If you're in a batch with a lot of students, you might have more, or you might have less if you have less students in your batch. So that's pretty much how it works, and then you go to classes together with your group. So every single class that you have a timetable, and you learn with just your group mates. Sometimes you have things like sister groups, so if you're in group A, group B is your sister group, things like that. So you might have to mix classes with them, but in general we do lectures together as a batch. Personally, I like this idea because it does give you some one-on-one time with the professor, and it's not just like a whole bunch of people in a lecture hall learning something, and if you don't understand something, you can't even ask. So it's a very good system that they have there, where you learn in small little groups so that you have that sort of attention, that student-teacher sort of relationship is there. So another thing that you might want to note is you're gonna have a lot of work to do. We had a lot of work to do because before you go to class, they expect you to prepare. So whatever you learned in the lectures, that's the material you have to prepare. You usually have a professor asking you questions, it's more of a conversation type of thing. They do give quite a lot of assignments, so you have to come to class already prepared, and then you usually have to answer a bunch of questions, and that's usually how classes are conducted. So and then when it comes to classes, all classes are compulsory. You have to attend every single class because they have like a general assessment. So when you get to class, they do have everybody's name on the list. They have your attendance. They do mark your attendance. Some professors don't, but most do. So you do have to attend every class, because if you miss a class, you have to replace that class. And then with our university, you actually have to pay to replace that class. It's called Atrabotka, and you have to pay a certain amount depending on how many classes you missed and the number of hours of the class. So you might not want to end up in that situation, because that takes away from your pocket and it's not fun. I know sometimes you're a student and you might miss classes. I've missed classes like before, but at the end of the day, it's not worth it to replace them. So you also have an overall assessment, and it's called your Zachart. So from each subject, in order to get Zachart, you have to have attended every class, and you have to get your signature from your professor, or whatever the case. So that's the thing. It's a bit hectic when it comes to our studying. Like in med school, it was very hectic. There was a lot to do, and you have to have had that Zachart. Zachart is basically credit. I don't know if I mentioned that, but so after you get your credit, then you can do exams. So exams work in a ticket system. We have an exam in Obs and Gyn, and you basically go to the exam room, you pick a ticket, and that ticket could contain any question really from the entire topics that you've covered. Usually they give you a list of questions that you might expect beforehand, so that's not an issue. So you're basically going to pick a ticket. It's going to have some questions. It might have some clinical cases on the questions, and you basically have to answer to that particular ticket that you're given. So it's a bit tricky because you might not have studied what's on your ticket, which happens way more than you think. It does happen. It's not like other universities where you get a generalized paper. It's a paper with questions from everything that you've learned, and at least you write down the things that you know, the things that you don't know, then fine. It's not like that. With us, it's like you just get random question and then boom, it's time, it's party time. It's actually a good system because you only get to focus on the questions that are given to you. So you usually have some time to prepare, and then you prepare for maybe like 20 minutes, and then you go with your credit book to the teacher, the professor, and basically you answer to them orally. And sometimes they ask you extra questions from different topics, and maybe those are the topics that you know. So that's how it all works out. It all ties in together in the end, so it works out. So it's not as complicated as it sounds, it's not as crazy as it sounds, but it does work out, and that is fine. So another thing that I wanted to mention is when it comes to classes, right? I talked about missing classes. One way to avoid missing classes is don't be late. Russians do not like people who are late. They hate that, when you're late, when you're just looking all slackish and stuff like that. These are very strict, and they do in fact lock the door. So you might find that being late actually makes you miss more classes, which you don't want, because we don't want to pay money. So yeah, that is that. And basically this exam system and this class system goes on from your first to your 6th year. During your preclinical years, like I said, you're going to have like 2-3 classes in one day and lectures, which is hectic. But once you get to 3rd year through 6th year, you're going to have cycles. When you start doing cycles, you're going to different hospitals. That's more enjoyable because you get to be more exposed to see what is it really that you like about medicine, which cycles are best suited to you, what do you enjoy the most. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the education system is during your summer holidays, so you're gonna have to do summer practicals. So basically what you do in your summer practicals, you go to a hospital, and it's basically like your little internship. You're going there to work as a medical student. You're going to do different things. During the first years, 2nd years, 3rd, you don't really do much, honestly. They'll have you doing like the petty little things, and then when you go like 3rd, you're going up, you might do more things like helping the nurses, doing injections, and all these kind of things. If you're going to do them in Russia, that's what to expect. It's basically a mandatory thing that you have to do, and you also get credit for that particular thing. So I wish I had actually done all my summer practices in Russia, and I wish I had done them here as well, because there were times that I would come home to visit, and I still did my summer practicals in Russia, and then I came here for vacation. And I wish I had done mine here because I never really got familiar with the hospital system here, and now I'm back to do my internship here, and I wish I knew how the hospital system works here. So just a little tip for you: if you are going to study in Russia, it's better to do your summer practicals in your country, so that if you're planning to go back to your country after your 6 years, you're sort of affiliated with how the system works in your country, which would be very beneficial when you start to do your internship. Another thing that I wanted to cover is the food. When it comes to the food and culture, it's pretty much you might struggle with the food, I'm not gonna lie. The food is not great. The cuisine there is not very great, but I'm pretty sure you know that. I don't think anyone has ever heard of great Russian cuisine, I have tried Russian food before, and it's all right. It's nothing I would eat again, to be honest. So the food struggle is definitely real. I definitely struggled quite a bit. It definitely tastes completely different from what you might be used to, but basically that's pretty much it about that. I don't really have much to say about that, except the fact that I didn't really enjoy the food portion of my journey. It wasn't very good. The food struggle is definitely real over there. That might make you miss home quite a lot. Another thing that you might be feeling quite a lot is homesickness. You're definitely gonna miss home. Of course, you're far away from your family. Actually, during the winter is when things get very hard. Everything gets very gloomy. You might be having some issues with your mental, like everything gets very disturbed during winter. Like you're fatigued, you've got a lot of classes, you've got a lot of assignments, so everything might tie in together and you might miss home. So that's definitely something that you're gonna have to handle and deal with. Personally, before I went to uni in Russia, I had lived outside. I had pretty much had gone to boarding schools most of my schooling life, so I'm used to being away from home. I'm used to being independent. I'm used to not necessarily having my parents around all the time. Even when I miss them, I know how to handle that. But if you're coming fresh out of high school, these are things that you might miss when you are there. So it's very important to keep in touch with your family, keep in touch with the people you know from back home, so they can give you, you know, sort of that little kick that you need. You know, you're gonna need that for sure. Yeah, even though things get tough, it's very important for you to work on your mental health, because remember, like I said, if you are going to med school, in fact, it's not just going to med school. Other people in other universities have very hectic schedules, probably even more than med students in some other universities. So you might have very hectic work schedules, you might have a lot of things to do, and then on top of that you have bad weather, so your mental health might be deteriorating as the winter progresses along. So you might want to find things that make you sort of help you cope, you know, small little things that can help you make your situation a little bit better, because it's very easy to fall down the hole of depression and just basically lose it. So yeah, it's very important to keep things together, and maybe I'll do a separate video on that, to be honest, because I don't want to get into the whole mental health thing right now. Yeah, I don't want to scare you off, but like I said, I want to give you a realistic sort of idea of what you're getting yourself into, because I don't want to sugarcoat things and then you get there and you're like, oh my god, this is actually harder than it seems, because it might be that way. So I'm giving you a very realistic version, but at the same time I'm not trying to scare you off, because I made it through, so you probably can too. And then another thing that I wanted to talk about on a lighter note, travel and lifestyle sort of things that you can do. That's like the fun times, you know, that's summertime, or if you get a chance to break, maybe you have a cycle break, you could travel to other cities. So one of the best cities that I went to, I think, was Sochi. It was amazing. I had the best time there. I've been to St. Petersburg as well. That's a great place to see. It's amazing. Like, it's unreal how beautiful these places are. So those are little things that you can basically do in your free time, just to, you know, get away from your city. It's always nice to get away from your city, go someplace else, meet the locals over there. Sometimes you might find you just go to a city, you meet people, and you have fun with them in their city, you know. Those are like the best times you might have, and then you go back to your city, continue with your classes, and life goes on. You know, those are just little things that you can do, but definitely the top, I would say, 3 cities that you have to go to are obviously Sochi, St. Petersburg, and Moscow. Those are probably the most sort of touristy places that you could go to. So yeah, they are places that you can go and enjoy yourself and have some fun. So you definitely will have the best of both worlds. You know, you can study, but you can also go outside the city and have some fun. At the end of the day, it's not all about work, work, work. You can take time to vacation and go outside the city. So the last thing that I want to get to is essentials when you are going. I'm not going to make this specifically to med students. I think I'll do a separate video on that, what you'll probably need. But when it comes to packing, like I said, one of the mistakes that I made was packing a lot of winter stuff and going there and wasting space. So yeah, you might want to save that for later. You buy your winter stuff over there. It's very important that you pack the things that you're probably just gonna need, you know. So yeah, basically the essentials that you need, obviously your documents. It's very important to have at least a few items of clothing that you might need. If you choose to buy clothing there, that's fine as well. Also, just a few things that you might miss from home. Like, I packed things like snacks and stuff like that. It sounds crazy, but those are things that you do miss when you're there and you just want a little piece of home. And another thing that you might want to remember, especially if you're a female, is that the stuff that they have over there is tailored for white people basically, because they don't have people like us there. So if you need things like braids or something, you're not gonna find them there unless you have people who sell them there and stuff like that. So those are things that you might want to take. You might want to take things that are suited, like let's say you have a particular type of skin problem and you only use a particular type of lotion or soap or whatever. You might want to take those with you. Those are things that you might want to take with you because you can't find them there. Just basically take things that you know, like, okay, I won't find this stuff over here because on that side they have stuff that's tailored for them and they don't necessarily have a lot of things that would accommodate me. So yeah, those are the things that you want to focus on taking. Yeah, those are basically the things you want to focus on. Your documents, the things that you know you can't find over there. If you have any special medication that you take, you might also want to stock up on that. And yeah, I won't get into med school essentials because I feel like that's a video for another day. But basically just take what you will need and try not to pack your whole life, you know, because at the end of the day you're starting a new life over there and that will be your home for the next 6 years. So just remember that you can't take everything with you and just pack smartly. So I feel like that concludes everything. I hope you guys have a general idea of what to expect, and I hope I covered every single thing. That was basically my experience in a nutshell, and if you have any questions, please do not be afraid to comment. I hope this video was helpful to you, whether you are planning to go to study in Russia or you are soon going to travel to Russia, or if you just are already there and there's some things that you know you wanted to get from this video. I hope this definitely helps you, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.